You probably think you already know what ultra-processed food looks like: soda, chips, candy, fast food. But what if the biggest problem isn't the obvious junk, but the foods sitting quietly in your kitchen right now? Foods that look healthy, feel familiar, or even claim to be nutritious, yet are engineered, modified, and built from ingredients you would never use at home. Today, we're breaking down the everyday products that millions of people eat without realizing they're ultra-processed, and once you see what's actually inside them, you'll never look at your grocery shopping the same way again. Most people believe they already know what ultra-processed food looks like. They imagine neon-colored snacks, cheap packaged meals, oversized fast food burgers dripping with grease, and brightly marketed breakfast cereals loaded with sugar. And because they assume the problem is obvious, they also assume they're doing a pretty good job avoiding it. That what if the truth is far more complicated and much more surprising? What if ultra-processed foods aren't just hiding in the junk food aisle, but in the everyday items that millions of people eat without a second thought? What if some of the staples you think are healthy foods marketed as convenient, wholesome, or even nutritious are actually engineered products created in a factory, not ingredients harvested from nature? Today, we're going to explore the hidden world of ultra-processed foods, not the kinds you already know are bad, but the ones that slip through the cracks of awareness. These foods look familiar, comforting, even harmless, yet nutrition researchers say they fit the definition of ultra-processed just as clearly as soda or candy. And once you understand what makes a food ultra-processed, not just high in sugar or fat, you'll start seeing the food system differently. You'll start questioning labels, scanning ingredients, and noticing patterns that completely change how you shop, cook, and eat. Because once these foods are exposed for what they actually are, you can't unsee it. Before we talk about which foods qualify, we need to understand the concept itself. The term ultra-processed comes from something called the NOVA classification system, a framework created by food scientists and public health researchers to categorize food not by calories or fat content, but by the degree of industrial processing it has gone through. NOVA explains that foods can be grouped into 4 categories. Group 1 is unprocessed or minimally processed foods, things like fruits, vegetables, raw meat, beans, eggs, nuts, and whole grains. These foods look like their natural form, and nothing is added to them. Group 2 is processed culinary ingredient soils, butter, sugar, salt ingredients used to prepare food. Group 3 is processed foods like canned vegetables with salt, cheese, traditional breads, or smoked meats. These foods have just a few added ingredients but are still recognizable as real food. Then comes Group 4, ultra-processed foods, or UPFs. UPFs are not simply foods with added sugar or salt. They are products created through industrial processes that you cannot replicate in a home kitchen. They contain ingredients that you would never find at a grocery store, things like stabilizers, emulsifiers, thickeners, artificial colors, synthetic sweeteners, protein isolates, enzymatically modified starches, chemical preservatives, and substances designed to mimic real food textures, flavors, and smells. Ultra-processed foods are engineered for convenience, long shelf life, strong flavor, and high craveability. They often come with flashy marketing, cute mascots, or promises of health. High protein, low fat, low sugar, heart healthy, immune support, gluten-free, plant-based. And yet, despite these claims, the defining feature of UPFs is this: the food is no longer food, it's a formulation. This means a surprising number of everyday products belong to the UPF category, even though most people assume they're perfectly normal foods. Let's start with the items that tend to shock people. These are foods that seem simple, traditional, or harmless, yet they fit every characteristic of ultra-processed formulations. Many people assume all bread is more or less the same: flour, water, yeast, salt. But most supermarket bread contains more than 10 to 20 ingredients, including emulsifiers, dough conditioners, stabilizers, preservatives, added sugars, coloring agents, and industrial oils. These ingredients aren't there by accident. They're designed to keep bread soft for weeks, prevent crumbling, enhance browning, and create a texture that feels more appealing than the bread made in a local bakery. Even whole grain or multigrain supermarket loaves are often full of additives that qualify them as ultra-processed. Yogurt has a reputation as a health food, but flavored yogurts are often filled with artificial stabilizers, artificial sweeteners, gums, modified starches, natural flavors, preservatives, and colorants. What looks like fruit at the bottom is usually a mixture of fruit essence, sugar, and processed starches created to imitate real fruit texture. These are marketed as fitness-friendly snacks, but most bars are made with syrups, protein isolates, refined oils, artificial flavors, and industrial binders. Their ingredients lists look more like something from a chemistry lab than a kitchen. The protein usually comes from highly processed isolates: pea protein isolate, soy protein isolate, or whey protein isolate, rather than whole foods. Plain oats are unprocessed, but instant flavored oatmeal packets are packed with anti-caking agents, sweeteners, flavors, and stabilizers. The oats themselves are pre-gelatinized and processed to cook instantly, which already makes them more processed, but the true ultra-processed nature comes from the additives. This one surprises many people because plant-based products are marketed as clean, modern, sustainable, or natural. But these foods, burgers, faux chicken, vegan sausages are engineered from isolates, gums, starches, colors, and flavors that replicate the sensory experience of meat. They contain components that do not occur naturally in plants in that form. Even the healthy ones, bran cereals, oat clusters, cornflakes, are ultra-processed because the grains are extruded under high pressure and heat to create shapes and textures that don't exist naturally. The process can destroy nutrients, requiring refortification with vitamins and minerals. Cup noodles, instant ramen, canned soups, and powdered soup mixes rely on preservatives, flavor boosters, artificial colors, gums, and industrial flavor additives to maintain taste and shelf life. The noodles themselves are pre-fried and dehydrated through industrial techniques. Liquid or powdered creamers contain hydrogenated oils, emulsifiers, stabilizers, artificial flavors, and sweeteners. Many creamers contain no milk at all, but they mimic milk's appearance and texture perfectly. Almond milk, oat milk, soy milk, coconut milk. Most store-bought versions contain emulsifiers like gelene gum or carrageenan, stabilizers to keep the texture uniform, and flavors to mask bitterness. Some are more processed than others, but many fall squarely into the UPF category. The reason these are ultra-processed isn't the low sugar content itself, it's the artificial sweeteners, flavor enhancers, and texturizers used to compensate for the missing sugar. When you take out fat or sugar, manufacturers replace them with industrial additives to keep the taste appealing. And this is only the beginning. Once you start identifying ultra-processed foods, you realize they're everywhere in sauces, snacks, spreads, frozen meals, even healthy convenience foods that market themselves as clean, simple, or wholesome. What makes these foods ultra-processed isn't simply that they come in a package or have added salt. It's the presence of cosmetic additives ingredients that serve no nutritional purpose, but make a product taste, look, smell, or feel more like food. This includes things like emulsifiers that prevent separation, stabilizers that create smooth texture, thickeners that mimic creaminess, artificial colors that make food appear fresh, natural flavors that simulate real taste, preservatives that extend shelf life, hydrogenated oils that create mouthfeel, protein, isolates not found in natural foods, sweeteners far sweeter than sugar. These additives allow companies to engineer foods that hit the brain's reward systems more powerfully than natural foods. They make products cheap to produce, easy to transport, and very profitable. The result is a food environment where ultra-processed products dominate shelves not only because they taste good, but because they're engineered to be irresistible. Ultra-processed foods became mainstream not because they're the healthiest option, but because they're convenient, affordable, shelf-stable, and easy to store. Busy lifestyles, long work hours, and shrinking cooking time contributed to the rise of ready-to-eat products. Marketing campaigns reinforce the idea that these foods are modern, smart, or even superior to traditional cooking. In many households, ultra-processed foods replaced basic staples: breakfast cereal instead of cooked grains, instant noodles instead of homemade meals, flavored yogurt instead of plain milk, protein bars instead of nuts or fruit, packaged bread instead of bakery loaves. Slowly, the line between food and product blurred. Dozens of large studies show strong associations between high UPF consumption and obesity, TYPE2, diabetes, heart disease, metabolic dysfunction, digestive issues, depression, and anxiety. Increased all-cause mortality. Researchers believe the harmful effects come from multiple factors: overeating caused by hyper-palatable textures, inflammation triggered by additives, poor nutrient density, and glycemic spikes from refined starches. In other words, ultra-processed foods harm the body not just because of calories, but because of how the body reacts to engineered formulations that bypass normal appetite regulation. When you walk through a grocery store now, look again. Notice the products with long ingredient lists. Notice how many foods rely on additives you've never heard of. Notice the foods that are healthy, light, plant-based, diet, fit, natural, yet still engineered. Because the truth is, ultra-processed foods aren't just junk food. They are everyday foods disguised as normal. And understanding the difference is the first step toward reclaiming your health one ingredient list at a time.